Clemson took a hit 2 weeks ago, losing by 3 to Syracuse, and NC State fell to Notre Dame last week. But now they play each other.
Yeah, and with Kelly Bryant looking to be at least a little closer to 100%, if not 100%, they're really going to be looking to get moving on all cylinders and get ready for the college football playoff.
Well, one thing Clemson does have going into this game is history on its side. Over 118 years, Clemson has won 66% of the time. But that doesn't always mean anything. They do have a balanced offense, though, under Kelly Bryant, who sets the expectation as a dual-threat quarterback. While he does put plenty of yards on the ground, he's got a solid wide receiver core in Ray McLeod, Hunter Renfrow, and Deon Cain, who all have over 350 receiving yards. And in the backfield, Bryant, along with Tavian Feaster and Travis Etienne, have combined for almost 1,400 yards this season. Having an array of options like this makes this team two-dimensional and unpredictable. Then you have the defense. They limit their opponents to 282 offensive yards per game. They have almost 20 sacks this season, and they come in 6th in the nation, only allowing 13 points per game.
It's going to be hard for this NC State offense that hasn't looked too great throughout the season to really produce points and move down the field. But this NC State team is a defensive team. It's a Wolfpack. And that Wolfpack and their rush defense specifically is led by Jared Fernandez, Bradley Chubb, and Arius Moore, who so far on the year are only allowing 119 yards per game in the rush on their rushing defense, which is in the top 10 in the entire country. They look to really keep that up against this Clemson team, they do favor the run a little more, but they do have a pretty good passing attack. Hopefully, Nyheim Hines is back, and that would really help this Wolfpack be slightly more balanced on offense. With your starting running back injured, it's hard to have a good rushing attack, and not having a good rushing attack hurts your passing attack naturally. But even with him out, they do have the 26th ranked pass offense, so it doesn't seem like the injury has really hurt their quarterback and wide receiver play too much on the year. And they're extremely explosive. 7 of their top 11 ball carriers average over 10 yards per touch on the year. And even on defense, they're explosive. They've forced 22 turnovers, which is something that Clemson is really going to have to watch out for.
It's so hard to have so many players on the offensive side of the ball put up impressive stats, like over 10 yards. But they do have a couple weaknesses. They've been one of my favorite teams to watch this year, but last week they got outgained offensively by Notre Dame. 422 yards for Notre Dame compared to 263 offensive yards for NC State. You certainly won't win with stats like that, and that was only one area that was lacking. The rushing game was another. Normally they average 161 rushing yards, but they came nowhere near that last week. The lucky number was 50. And in case you were wondering just how bad that is, let me provide you with a little bit of perspective. The Florida Gators did better with 183 rushing yards against Georgia last week. To be fair, though, the Wolfpack was missing a key player after Nyheim Hines suffered an ankle injury halfway through the first quarter. That's 3.5 quarters without your leading ball carrier. That's tough. But that leads us into injuries. Hines should be back on Saturday, but there's about another dozen injuries the Wolfpack suffers from. Doesn't seem to have too much of an effect on them overall this season, but it does take away from the depth on the bench, which is critical when the defense starts to get tired in the third and fourth quarters, which is what we saw last week.
Yeah, and injuries are something that a lot of teams are having to worry about at this point in the year. Clemson is no exception. They currently have 9 injuries, and as you talked about earlier, their quarterback happens to be one of them. Whether he's 100% just yet is still yet to be seen. After the last 2 weeks, they've dropped to 66th nationally passing the ball. That's something that could really hurt them. If you become one-dimensional against this NC State defense, they can take advantage. They know how to stop the rush, as we talked about earlier. And, if they can load up the box and get even more players in there to stop you, you're not going to have much luck doing much of anything. Something that Notre Dame last week did a really good job of keeping a balanced offense and making sure that they had to have at least 1 or 2 safeties back for those big plays. It'll be interesting to see if Clemson's able to do that again this week. And they also just have a lack of explosive passing plays. They only have 22 plays of 20 yards or more so far this season. To put that into perspective, the last 6 years, at this point in the season, they've had at least 33, and that's at the bare minimum. So it's really been a struggle for this passing offense to really get going in those explosive plays. It's allowed a lot of teams to creep up those defensive players. You saw it last week. You saw it against Syracuse in that huge upset. If you're able to load up the box and really you only have to worry about passes that are 15 yards and shorter, it really helps your overall defense.
The NC State player to watch, though, is Jalen Samuels. 209 rushing yards doesn't seem like a whole lot, but he's got 7 rushing touchdowns. You can add 3 more to that because he likes to show off his hands and has gained a total of 474 receiving yards.
My player to watch is going to be lined up against him, at least for part of the game. His name is Dorian O'Daniel. He's 6'1", 215 pounds, and runs a 4.5 40. He's big enough to cover tight ends, but he's still fast and quick enough to cover some of those slot receivers and running backs. He really is everywhere on the field. As a linebacker, he's second on his team in total tackles, and he's also leading his team in interceptions. He has 3 on the year and returns those for about 33 yards, just proving how quick, agile, and just explosive he is as a player. He has also returned 2 of those for touchdowns, and he also has a fumble recovery just to, really show off how impressive of an overall defensive player he is.
Now, this is a tough pick, especially with all the injuries going around. Both these teams have played against good programs. Clemson played against Auburn early on in the season, and we just had NC State play Notre Dame last week. They did lose. Clemson stayed on top of Auburn, but I think I have to go with Clemson. That's what my gut's telling me. I'd like to see NC State pull out the win, but I just think Clemson has the advantages going into this game.
Yeah, for me, it's really going to depend on whether or not Kelly Bryant is able to get a rhythm passing the ball instead of just running the ball. If they're able to pass the ball successfully with him, then I don't think they'll have very many troubles. But if NC State can really focus in on that rushing attack, I don't think Clemson's going to be able to march down the field like they have been in weeks past, and I think that's going to cause a lot of issues. And for that reason, I'm going to go with NC State in this game.
I think the passing attack is going to be fine, but we'll have to see on Saturday. Well, if you enjoyed this game preview, we have 4 other top 25 matchups for Week 10. They're along the right side of your screen. Be sure to check them out. I'm Janae Muchmore.
And I'm Griffin Parkrose.
Thanks for watching RedZone to EndZone, and have a great weekend.